Amanda knew she was beautiful and made sure everyone else knew it. Every day, she would stand in front of a small mirror, smiling at her reflection. "I am the most beautiful girl in Umuomaku," she would say to herself. "No man can resist me. They should be on their knees begging for my love." Her confidence was not just pride. It was almost like a ritual. She carried herself with so much grace and pride that even women admired her, though some secretly envied her. But Amanda's beauty came with arrogance. She believed no other girl could compete with her. "Who in this village can be more beautiful than me?" she often thought. Her confidence grew every day. One morning, Amanda overheard some women gossiping at the market. They were talking about a man from a neighboring village who was coming to marry a girl named Easy. Amanda froze. She whispered to herself, "Why not me?" Her heart burned with anger and jealousy. Amanda could not understand why any man would choose someone else over her. The news about Easy and the mysterious man spread like wildfire. Everyone was excited about the upcoming union, but Amanda felt nothing but rage. For days she stayed inside her heart, refusing to talk to anyone. "How can this happen?" she muttered angrily. "How dare he come to this village and choose Easy over me?" Amanda cried and sulked. She could not bear the thought of someone else being admired more than her. In her mind, she was the queen of beauty in Umuomaku, and no one could take that crown from her. But now Easy was stealing the spotlight, and Amanda's pride was deeply wounded. One evening, as the sun set over the village, Amanda made a decision. "If the men of Umuomaku won't worship me, then I will make them," she said, her eyes filled with determination. "I will show them that no one, not even Easy, can shine brighter than me." But Amanda did not know how to make her wish come true. She thought of the river goddess, a mystical being that people often spoke about in whispers. The goddess was said to grant wishes, but a gift always came with a price. Desperate and blinded by her pride, Amanda decided to seek the goddess's help. Late one night, when the village was quiet and the stars shone brightly, Amanda walked to the river. Her heart raced as she stepped into the cold water, calling out to the river goddess. "Oh, great goddess of love, hear my cry," she pleaded. "I am Amanda, the most beautiful girl in Umuomaku. I want every man in this village and beyond to worship me. Please grant me this wish." For a moment there was silence. Then the water began to ripple, and a soft glowing light emerged. The river goddess appeared, her voice gentle but powerful. "Amanda," she said, "I have heard your request. I will give you what you desire, but there are conditions." Amanda nodded eagerly. "Anything. I will do anything," she replied. The goddess handed out a small bottle of perfume. "Spray this every morning, and you will become irresistible. No man will be able to ignore you. But beware, Amanda, if you sleep with any man. He will fall ill with a mysterious sickness. And if this bottle ever breaks, you will lose everything. Your beauty, your youth, and your charm. Do you accept?" Without thinking twice, Amanda took the bottle. "I accept," she said, her eyes shining with excitement. She did not care about the consequences. All she wanted was to be adored. The next morning, Amanda sprayed the perfume as the goddess instructed. As soon as she stepped out of her house, heads turned. Men who usually walked past her without a second glance were now mesmerized. "Amanda, you look even more beautiful today," one man said. Another offered to carry her basket to the market. By the time she reached the village square, a crowd of men was following her. Amanda smiled to herself. "It's working," she thought. She loved the attention and began to enjoy her newfound power. Men who once ignored her were now lining up at her door, begging for her love. She felt like a queen, and her pride grew even more. She began to flirt with the men, enjoying how they fought for her attention. Some men even left their girlfriends and fiancés just to be near her. However, something strange began to happen. One by one, the men who slept with her fell mysteriously ill. They complained of headaches, weakness, and fever. No one could explain the sickness, but Amanda ignored it. She was too blinded by her new power to care. The mysterious sickness spread to nearly every household in Umuamaku. The young men of the village were weak and bedridden, and no one could find a cure. The elders and women of the village could not sit back any longer. After their meeting, they decided to confront Amanda. They were convinced she had something to do with the strange events happening in the village. Early one morning, a group of elders and angry women marched to Amanda's house. Their faces were stern, and their voices were loud as they banged on her door. "Amanda, come out!" one of the elders shouted. "We need answers. What have you done to our sons and brothers?" Startled, Amanda jumped out of bed, clutching the bottle of perfume. Her heart raced as she heard the crowd outside. She knew they were growing suspicious, but she did not expect them to confront her so soon. "What do I do?" she whispered to herself. When Amanda opened the door, the villagers stared at her with accusing eyes. "Amanda," one of the elders began, "we know something is not right. Every man who has slept with you falls mysteriously ill. Tell us the truth." Amanda tried to remain calm. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, forcing a smile. "I have done nothing wrong." But the women were not convinced. "Lie!" one of them shouted. "Since you started bewitched our men, this village has known nothing but sickness and sorrow." Amanda's hands trembled as she tried to deny their accusations. "You have no proof," she said. But as the crowd grew louder, Amanda's panic worsened. She clutched the perfume bottle tightly, hoping it would protect her. However, as she tried to spray it to maintain control over the crowd, her trembling hands betrayed her. The bottle slipped from her grip, fell to the ground, and shattered into pieces. Everyone gasped as Amanda screamed, realizing her fate. The moment the perfume bottle shattered, a strange silence fell over the crowd. Amanda's scream echoed through the village, and all eyes were fixed on her. Suddenly, Amanda began to shake uncontrollably, and tears streamed down her face. No, this can't be happening," she cried. The villagers stared at her, confused and suspicious. "What's going on, Amanda?" one of the elders demanded. "What are you hiding from us?" Unable to keep the truth any longer, Amanda fell to her knees. I made a mistake," she wailed. "I went to the river goddess of love. I begged her to make me irresistible so that every man would worship me. She gave me a perfume, but she warned me there would be consequences." Gasps erupted from the crowd. The elders and women were horrified as Amanda continued to confess. "Every man who comes close to me and has sex with me will fall mysteriously ill. And now that the bottle is broken, I will lose everything. My beauty, my youth, my shape. I didn't mean for this to happen." The crowd was stunned. The women whispered among themselves, some in anger, others in disbelief. "You brought this curse upon our village because of your pride," one elder said, his voice shaking with anger. "I did not know it would turn out like this." Amanda cried, but no one was moved by her tears. Amanda spent many days in her hut, a silent figure in the village of Umuamaku, reflecting on her actions. The once bustling village square now seemed so distant to her, like a memory she could no longer touch. Her days were now filled with solitude and regret. The once constant attention and admiration she had received were gone. She was no longer the beautiful Amanda that the villagers had whispered about. The perfume that had once granted her irresistible allure had shattered, and with it, her life had unraveled in ways she could never have imagined. Her reflection in the broken mirror now seemed foreign to her. The woman she saw, now darker and older, was a mere shadow of her former self. She could no longer recognize her own face, let alone her worth. The beauty she had once cherished had faded, leaving behind a person she could barely comprehend. Amanda no longer smiled at her reflection. Instead, she saw only pain from the choices she had made and the suffering she had caused. It was as though the mirror itself had become a symbol of her inner torment. The villagers, too, had changed. They no longer feared her beauty or the power she had once wielded. Her name had become a curse, spoken in hushed tones as a warning to others. Amanda's beauty had always been her greatest asset, but now it had turned against her. The elders, once her silent admirers, now spoke of her as a cautionary tale for their children. Amanda had broken the balance of their village, and her actions had consequences far beyond her own life. But while the village had moved on, Amanda was left alone in her misery. There were days when she longed for the life she had once known. There were nights when she lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her humble hut, and wished that she could turn back time. If only she had not let her pride and jealousy consume her. If only she had not sought the help of the river goddess. If only she had not believed that beauty and attention could fill the emptiness in her heart. The truth was, she had never been happy. All her beauty, all the attention, it had been fleeting, as ephemeral as the perfume she had used to trap the hearts of men. As the days passed, Amanda's health began to deteriorate. Her once flawless skin was now riddled with blemishes, and the darkness that had crept into her soul seemed to seep into her very being. Her beauty had been her shield, but now that it was gone, she was left vulnerable, exposed to the harsh reality of her actions. The sickness that had once affected the men of the village seemed to have claimed her as well. It was as though the gods themselves had taken retribution. She felt weaker and weaker with each passing day. Every breath she took felt like a struggle, and the pain in her chest seemed to grow with every memory of her past life. She tried to ignore it, but the truth was undeniable. Her days were numbered. Amanda knew that the curse of the river goddess had not only taken her beauty but had also come for her life. And it was her own fault. The days of being admired, the days of walking through the village with a sense of superiority, were all gone. All that remained were the consequences of her actions. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the village settled into its familiar silence, Amanda heard a knock at her door. It was soft at first, hesitant, as though the person on the other side was unsure whether they should even be there. But the knock came again, louder this time. Amanda hesitated. She had not spoken to anyone in weeks. The villagers had made it clear that she was no longer welcome, that she was a source of shame and disgrace. She was an outcast, and the thought of facing them again filled her with a sense of dread. But curiosity got the better of her, and slowly, she rose from her bed and walked to the door. She opened it, and to her surprise, it was Easy, the very girl who had stolen the attention of the village and whom Amanda had once so bitterly envied. "Easy," Amanda whispered, unsure if her eyes were playing tricks on her. Easy stood there, her face softer than Amanda remembered, a look of pity in her eyes. "Amanda," she said quietly, "I came to see you. I know what you've been going through, and I wanted to offer you something." Amanda stared at her, her mind racing. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. "I don't want anything from you," Easy replied gently. "I just wanted to talk. I know I was the one who took the spotlight, but I never wanted to see you suffer. What happened to you? It wasn't your fault, not really. You were consumed by pride, yes, but you were only human." Amanda's heart clenched at her words. "Human," she whispered, feeling the weight of the word. "I thought I was above everyone. I thought I was untouchable." Easy shook her head. "No one is untouchable, Amanda. Not even the most beautiful girl in Umuamaku. Not even me. Beauty fades, youth fades. But the heart, it's the one thing that can truly remain. If you want to find peace, you need to learn to look within yourself." Amanda felt the sting of Easy's words. She had spent so long chasing external validation, focusing on the superficial aspects of life, that she had neglected what truly mattered, the things that could have given her real happiness. "I don't know how to do that," she confessed, her voice breaking. Easy stepped forward, her expression kind. "Let me help you, Amanda. Let me show you that there is more to life than beauty. There is redemption. There is forgiveness. And there is love, real love. Not the kind that comes from beauty or power, but the kind that comes from the heart." Amanda stood there, torn between the bitterness of her past and the possibility of a different future. She had lost everything, her beauty, her youth, her power. But maybe there was still a chance for her to find something deeper, something that could restore the peace of her soul that had been lost in the pursuit of pride. Over the next few weeks, Amanda's life began to change. She stopped avoiding the village and started to seek the forgiveness of those she had wronged. She visited the homes of the young men who had fallen ill and apologized to their families. She sat with the elders and listened to their wisdom, no longer filled with arrogance but with humility. She began to help in the village, offering her time and energy to those in need. Slowly, the villagers began to see a different side of Amanda, one that had been buried under the weight of her vanity. It wasn't easy. The path to redemption was long, and Amanda knew she could never fully erase the damage she had done. But with each small act of kindness, with each apology, with each tear shed for the pain she had caused, she felt the darkness in her heart begin to lift. One day, while sitting by the river where she had once made her fateful deal with the goddess, Amanda realized something. Her beauty, her youth, her power, they had never been the things that defined her. It was her heart, her actions, her ability to change and grow that truly mattered. And in that moment, as the sun set over the river, Amanda made a vow to herself. She would no longer seek validation from the external world. She would seek peace, inner strength, and love from within. She would work to earn the forgiveness of the people she had hurt, not by magic or force, but by the sincerity of her actions. It was the first step towards healing, and for the first time in a long time, Amanda felt hope rising within her heart. The days dragged on in the village of Umuamaku, and Amanda's life remained painfully quiet. But there was something different about her now, something the villagers could see. It wasn't the beauty that once defined her, nor the power she had wielded with it. It was the shift in her heart, the genuine remorse that now filled her every thought. She had no illusions anymore about the cost of her pride. Her life, once filled with superficial pleasures and empty admiration, now had a deeper meaning, even if it wasn't yet clear to her. As she worked alongside the villagers, mending clothes for the sick, tending to the crops, and helping the elders with their daily tasks, she began to feel a strange sense of peace. It wasn't the same kind of peace she had once craved, the peace of adoration and external praise, but a quiet, grounded peace that came from living simply and selflessly. The first true sign of change came one evening when she visited the home of one of the young men who had fallen ill from the sickness. His name was Chijioke. He had been bedridden for weeks after spending one night with Amanda. His body weakened, his spirit crushed by the mysterious illness. But when Amanda knocked on the door, she didn't know what to expect. She feared he might hate her, or worse, that the villagers would throw her out entirely. But when the door creaked open, Chijioke's mother, a kind-faced woman with a weary smile, stepped forward. She looked at Amanda with a sadness in her eyes, but also with something else. Understanding. "Amanda," she said softly, her voice trembling. "You've come to see him." "Yes," Amanda replied, her voice a shadow of its former confidence. "I'm so sorry for everything I've done. I never meant for this to happen." She swallowed hard, her throat tight. "I came to ask for your forgiveness." The woman's eyes softened. She took Amanda's hands in hers and led her inside. Chijioke lay on the mat in the corner of the room. His body weak but his eyes still filled with the fire of youth. Amanda knelt beside him. "I've never apologized to you, Chijioke," she said quietly. "But I will now. I'm sorry for what I did, for what my vanity and selfishness caused you. You did not deserve this." Her voice cracked. "I didn't mean to hurt you or anyone else." Chijioke's eyes met hers, and for the first time, Amanda saw something in them that wasn't hatred. It was compassion. "Amanda," he said, his voice hoarse but sincere, "I can see the change in you. I know you didn't mean for this to happen. I forgive you." The weight of his words broke something inside her. Tears welled up in her eyes, and Amanda let them fall freely. She didn't hold them back anymore. For so long she had been too proud to cry, too proud to admit weakness. But now she could finally let go. "Thank you," she whispered, wiping her tears away. "Thank you for forgiving me." For the first time since the incident with the river goddess, Amanda felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. She didn't know if she could ever undo the harm she had caused, but this small act of kindness, this tiny step toward healing, gave her something to hold on to. Over the next several weeks, Amanda continued to work in the village, doing whatever she could to make amends. It was hard. Many villagers still avoided her, and some still whispered behind her back. But the more she worked, the more she realized that redemption wasn't an easy road, and that she didn't deserve forgiveness from everyone, especially not yet. But she had started the journey, and that was enough. One day, as she sat outside by the village well, helping the women gather water, a familiar face appeared in front of her. It was Easy, the girl Amanda had once so bitterly envied, the one who had unknowingly stolen her spotlight. But now, there was no resentment in Amanda's heart, only gratitude. "I've been watching you," Easy said, sitting beside her with a gentle smile. "You've changed, Amanda." Amanda nodded, her hands trembling as she held the bucket. "I've been trying. It's not easy. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm trying to be better." "You don't need to be perfect," Easy replied, her voice warm. "I know it's hard to forgive ourselves, but you've already started the journey. That's what matters." Amanda looked up at her, surprised by her kindness. "Why are you being so kind to me? After everything I've done?" Easy shrugged. "I know what it's like to feel like you've lost everything. To feel like you're not worthy of love or forgiveness. But that's not true, Amanda. We all make mistakes, but we can still find redemption if we choose to." Amanda smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. "Thank you, Easy. I don't know how to say it, but thank you." Easy stood up, brushing the dirt from her skirt. "You don't have to say anything. Just keep doing what you're doing. That's enough." The days continued to pass, and Amanda's transformation continued. She became a regular part of the community again, not as the vain and proud woman she had once been, but as someone who had learned humility, someone who was willing to give back. People began to notice her efforts. Slowly but surely, the villagers began to accept her again, though they had not forgotten the lesson her story taught them. One evening, as Amanda walked through the village square, she noticed something she hadn't seen in a long time: a group of young men laughing together, their spirits high. She had once been the object of their attention, their admiration. But now they were laughing with each other, not at her, and for the first time, Amanda realized that this was the kind of joy she had never known. It was real joy, free from the constraints of vanity, of seeking approval from others. It was the kind of joy that came from friendship, from shared experiences, and from genuine connection. Amanda paused for a moment watching them, and then she smiled. She didn't need to be the center of attention anymore. She didn't need the approval of every man in the village. She had something much more valuable now: peace. It was not long after that Amanda visited the river again. The spot where she had once stood, foolish and desperate, had changed in her eyes. The river goddess had given her what she had wanted, but at a great cost. And now, Amanda was ready to confront the goddess again, not to beg for beauty or power, but to thank her. When she reached the river, the familiar glow appeared. The river goddess, draped in ethereal light, appeared before her once again. "You have returned, Amanda," the goddess said, her voice no longer filled with judgment, but with a sense of peace. "You have learned the lesson." Amanda bowed her head in respect. "Yes, I have. Came to thank you. Not for the beauty you gave me, but for the lessons you taught me. I've learned that beauty is fleeting, and that true value comes from within. I've learned to be humble, to care for others, and to seek redemption." The goddess smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "You have changed, Amanda. You have learned what it means to be truly beautiful, not in the eyes of others but in your own heart. That is the greatest gift of all." Amanda felt a lightness in her chest. She no longer felt like she was chasing something outside of herself. She had found peace, and with it, she had found herself. The river goddess had given her what she needed. Not beauty, not power, but the strength to become a better version of herself. And for the first time in a long time, Amanda knew that she was enough. As the weeks passed, Amanda's life in Umuamaku seemed to take on a rhythm. a new pace that was both slower and more meaningful than anything she had ever known. The once vibrant, prideful woman who had once believed herself above everyone had now become a shadow of that former self, but in a way that allowed her to truly experience the world around her. Each day was no longer an attempt to secure her place as the most beautiful or the most adored, but a quiet and patient offering of herself to the community she had once abandoned. It was clear that the villagers were beginning to accept her again, though the acceptance was gradual. It wasn't that they had forgotten what she had done, but rather that they recognized her efforts to atone. The elders, who had initially seen her as a threat to the peace of their village, now nodded at her as she walked through the square. They no longer eyed her with suspicion but with a knowing respect. She had become an example not of how one could falter, but of how one could rise from that fall. Despite the progress, there were still moments of tension. One afternoon, as Amanda walked to the market to help her mother with some shopping, she overheard two women talking in hushed voices. They didn't know she was listening, and even though their words were quiet, they were sharp enough to cut through the air. "Amanda thinks we've forgotten, but I haven't. I won't forget what she did to my son. He was bedridden for weeks because of her," one woman said, her voice dripping with resentment. "She's been walking around like she's changed, but I see right through her. A leopard doesn't change its spots." The other woman nodded, but there was something softer in her eyes. "Maybe she's different now. People do change, you know." Amanda paused in her tracks, her heart racing. She had been so focused on making amends, so focused on doing the right thing, that she hadn't prepared herself for the possibility of rejection. She had assumed naively that the village would welcome her back with open arms, that the forgiveness she sought would be granted easily. But she had been wrong. She felt a pang in her chest, and for a moment, the weight of what she had done to these people seemed unbearable. It was not just the sickness she had caused. It was the time, the energy, the emotional toll her selfishness had taken on the lives of others. No apology could undo that. Amanda walked to the market without responding, her mind swirling with uncertainty. She had been so confident in her transformation, but now doubts began to creep in. Could she truly ever make up for the damage she had caused? Was it too late for redemption? Was she ever really forgiven? Later that evening, as the sun set over the village, Amanda sat on the edge of her bed, her hands folded in her lap, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. Her face was still not what it once was. The smooth, youthful complexion had faded to something more weathered. But it wasn't just her appearance that had changed. She had changed. She could feel it deep within her. A transformation that went beyond the surface, that extended to the core of who she was. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a deep sense of humility. The vanity had been replaced by a quiet strength, the kind that did not need to shout its worth. The days blurred together, and Amanda's life continued in its new rhythm. She would wake early to help tend the fields, work with the elders, and assist the women of the village in their chores. She spent hours listening to their stories, learning about their lives, and absorbing lessons that she had once ignored. And while the villagers slowly began to warm to her again, there was always a lingering distance, one she couldn't quite bridge. One day, she was tasked with collecting firewood from the forest, something she had once done with a sense of entitlement, expecting to be served and admired. But now, as she walked through the dense brush, carrying a heavy load, Amanda felt something shift in her heart. She was no longer resentful of the labor, no longer angry at the weight of her burden. For the first time in her life, she felt at peace with the work, with the struggle. It wasn't glamorous or beautiful, but it was real, and it was hers. There was no admiration in it, no adoration. Just quiet purpose. Amanda's thoughts drifted to the river goddess. She had granted Amanda what she had desired. Beauty, admiration, love, but at a great cost. Now, the village was healing, the sickness was fading, and the young men who had once been sick had begun to recover. The goddess had taken back the power she had given Amanda, and Amanda was left to deal with the consequences. But deep inside, Amanda no longer sought the goddess's attention. She had learned the most difficult lesson of all. True power did not lie in beauty or in winning the affection of others. It lay in humility, in the ability to accept one's flaws, and in the willingness to change. She no longer feared the goddess or her wrath. Amanda feared only her own pride, for that was the true enemy. As she returned from the forest with the firewood, she passed the old oak tree near the village center, where the elders often gathered. This time they were sitting in a circle, and one of them called to her. "Amanda, come join us," the elder said. "We have been talking about you." Amanda's heart skipped a beat, and she hesitated for a moment, wondering what they had been saying. She approached the circle cautiously, sitting down on the ground in front of them. "We've been watching you," another elder said, his voice kind but firm. "You've been working hard. You've apologized for your actions, and you've shown us your willingness to change. That is no small thing. It takes courage to admit when you've wronged others and to work toward healing." Amanda nodded, unable to speak for a moment. The words of the women earlier still echoed in her mind, but hearing these elders speak so plainly, so honestly, gave her a sense of relief. Perhaps she hadn't been so wrong after all. Perhaps she could still be forgiven. "We are not gods," the first elder continued. "We are human just like you. And like you, we are not perfect. But what matters is that you've learned. You've learned the hard way, but we believe you are on the right path." Amanda blinked back tears. She had been waiting for this moment, for some sign that her actions had not been in vain, for some sign that the villagers saw her as more than just a reflection of her past mistakes. The third elder, a woman whose face was as weathered as the land itself, spoke next. "It is said that the greatest beauty lies in a pure heart. I see that in you now. I see the change. And we, as a village, are ready to accept you again." Amanda's chest tightened with emotion, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was truly home. "Thank you," Amanda said, her voice thick with gratitude. "I know I can never truly make up for what I did, but I promise I will keep working to earn your trust to make things right." The elders nodded in unison. "We are not perfect, but we forgive. And we accept you." From that day forward, Amanda felt as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. It wasn't that the past had been erased. The sickness that had swept through the village, the lives it had disrupted, and the heartbreak she had caused could not be undone. But Amanda had taken the first real step toward redemption, and the villagers had seen that. The village of Umuomaku, once divided by pride, vanity, and jealousy, had begun to heal. And Amanda, who had been at the center of it all, had learned the most valuable lesson of all. True beauty was not in the reflection of a mirror or the admiration of others. It lay in the ability to forgive, to grow, and to change. With every passing day, Amanda's connection with the village deepened. She continued to work beside the villagers, learning the true value of community, of working together. As time went on, she no longer felt the need to be admired or adored. Instead, she focused on the bonds she had built with those around her. And in that simple, humble existence, Amanda found the peace she had once sought in beauty and adoration. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills of Umuomaku, Amanda stood outside her hut, looking out over the village. The sky was painted with shades of purple and orange, the air warm with the promise of another day. Amanda had no illusions anymore. She knew that life would never be easy, that redemption was an ongoing process. But she had learned the most valuable lesson of all. In the quiet moments, in the spaces between the noise and the chaos, she had found something better than beauty. She had found herself. As the months went by, Amanda's journey of redemption continued, and so did her deep connection with the village of Umuomaku. It wasn't just the simple acts of labor that filled her days, like gathering firewood, working in the fields, or helping with the cooking. It was the emotional work of healing. The village itself, once torn by envy, jealousy, and secrets, was now healing in tandem with Amanda. But while the villagers began to look at her with more acceptance, Amanda still fought a battle inside herself. Every day, she felt the weight of her past mistakes, the guilt that clawed at her heart for what she had done to the men of the village, for the sickness, for her selfishness. Despite the forgiveness from the elders, and the kind gestures from those who had once shunned her, the question still lingered. Could she ever truly forgive herself? One morning, as she worked alongside the elders, picking herbs by the river, Amanda was approached by a familiar face. It was Chuka, the young man who had been the first to truly accept her apology. He had been one of the many men who had fallen ill after spending time with her, but unlike the others, he had forgiven her long before she had fully forgiven herself. Chuka walked up to Amanda with a wide smile, holding a basket of freshly picked fruits from his farm. He had always been quiet, but his eyes now held a certain understanding, one that came with having lived through hardship and emerging from it stronger. "Amanda," he greeted, his tone friendly yet carrying an undertone of seriousness. "I've been thinking a lot about you lately." Amanda looked up, surprised at his approach. "What's on your mind, Chuka?" "I've been thinking about how much you've changed. How much the whole village has changed. It's not easy what you've gone through. I know the pain in your heart. You carry it every day, don't you?" he asked. Amanda nodded silently, her heart heavy. It felt like everyone could see through the cracks she'd tried to hide. "I want you to know," Chuka continued, his voice quiet but full of conviction. "I'm proud of you. We all are. You've fought to be better, not for us but for yourself. That's what matters." Amanda's throat tightened. It was the first time anyone had truly recognized the inner struggle she faced each day. They had seen her actions and judged her for them, but they also saw the remorse, the heartache she had endured as a result of her mistakes. "Thank you, Chuka," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You don't know how much your words mean to me." "I do," he said softly, lowering the basket and sitting next to her by the riverbank. "I understand more than you think. And I believe deep down that you're ready for the next step." "Next step?" Amanda looked at him with confusion, unsure of what he meant. The journey of redemption had felt long enough already. "Yes," he affirmed, turning to face her with a serious look. "I think it's time for you to forgive yourself. You've paid the price for your actions. But there's no point in carrying the burden any longer. We all make mistakes, Amanda. It's how we rise from them that defines us." Amanda felt a shift in her chest. She had spent so much time punishing herself, so much energy blaming herself for the suffering she had caused. But hearing Chuka's words, seeing the warmth in his eyes, something broke free inside her. For the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe she could let go of the guilt. Maybe she could allow herself the grace to move forward. The next few days were transformative for Amanda. She no longer woke up with the heavy weight of shame hanging over her head. She still carried the knowledge of her mistakes, but she no longer let them define her. The villagers saw this change in her as well. While many had been tentative in their acceptance, some of them, including the older women, began to call upon Amanda for their day-to-day tasks. One afternoon, while helping one of the village women cook, Amanda overheard a conversation that struck her deeply. "Amanda has been working tirelessly in the fields," said the woman who lived next to her. "I saw her helping with the harvest just yesterday, and she never complains. Not once does she make it look like it's beneath her." "I noticed that too," another woman replied. "She's done more for us than we could have ever asked. I didn't think she had it in her. To be honest, I'm glad we've given her a chance to redeem herself." Amanda paused, her hands stilling as she listened to the conversation. She felt a tinge of surprise. Was this real? Were they really saying this about her? The same women who had once criticized her for her vanity were now recognizing her humility and efforts. It was humbling, and for the first time in years, she felt the weight of admiration that wasn't based on beauty or power. It was based on respect for the work she had done, the growth she had shown. Later that evening, as the sun set in the village, Amanda sat on the porch of her small hut. The warm breeze brushed against her face, and she allowed herself a rare moment of peace. For so long, she had been chasing something that had always been within her reach: acceptance, forgiveness, peace. She had thought those things would come from others, from the village, from the men who had once admired her. But the truth was, they had to come from herself. The village had been healing for months, slowly but surely, and now Amanda could feel that healing deep in her bones. The sickness that had once swept through the young men had finally stopped. Those who had been bedridden were now back on their feet, stronger than before. The curse, the punishment of the river goddess, had been lifted, replaced by the power of forgiveness, by the grace of letting go. One afternoon Amanda received a visitor. It was the elder woman who had been among the first to speak out against her in the past. The elder, now wise with age and experience, sat down with Amanda on her porch, her eyes full of a quiet strength that seemed to have seen both good and evil in her lifetime. "Amanda," the elder said, her voice steady but not unkind. "I've been thinking. You have worked hard and your heart has changed. The village sees that and I see that. I want to tell you something." Amanda looked at her, her chest tight with anticipation. She had never expected to receive this kind of acknowledgement from the elder. "You have redeemed yourself," the elder said simply. "Not because of the work you've done, not because of the apologies you've made, but because you've shown us that you are capable of real change. You have taught us all that redemption comes from within, and for that, I thank you." Amanda sat silently for a long moment, processing the elder's words. It felt like the weight of the entire world had been lifted from her shoulders. She had thought she could never be forgiven, never be whole again, but here was this wise woman, offering her validation, offering her the grace that she had so desperately sought. "Thank you," Amanda finally whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving me the chance to prove myself." The elder smiled gently, her wrinkled face softening. "It was never about proving yourself to anyone, Amanda. It was about proving to yourself that you are worthy of love and forgiveness, just like anyone else." For the first time since she had walked away from the river goddess, Amanda understood the depth of that statement. She had spent so long trying to prove herself to others, to be the woman everyone admired, to be the one others wanted. But now she realized that it wasn't about proving anything. It was about being true to herself, about recognizing her own worth and accepting her imperfections. The days turned into months, and Amanda continued to live among the villagers, her heart at peace with who she had become. No longer obsessed with beauty or praise, she found fulfillment in simple things, working the land, helping those in need, and living a life that was no longer dominated by vanity or the search for approval. The village continued to flourish, and Amanda, once the most beautiful woman in Umuomaku, had become something far more precious. A woman of substance, a woman of strength, a woman who had learned the value of humility and grace. And one morning, as the sun rose over the hills of Umuomaku, Amanda stood by the river where it had all started. She no longer feared the goddess or the power she had once sought. She was no longer the vain girl who had wanted everything for herself. She had found something deeper, something more lasting, peace within herself. As the seasons changed, so did Amanda. With each passing day, the weight of her past actions seemed to lighten. She had worked tirelessly to rebuild her relationships with the villagers of Umuomaku, and although the process of healing was slow, Amanda could finally see the fruits of her labor. The villagers no longer looked at her with disdain, and instead, they had started to appreciate her quiet humility. It wasn't always easy. Some still eyed her with suspicion, reluctant to let go of the memories of who she had been. Yet, others had embraced her, offering forgiveness and understanding in ways Amanda never expected. One particularly hot afternoon, as Amanda carried water from the well, she came across a group of young girls sitting under the shade of a large tree. They were chatting and giggling, their faces full of innocence, but there was something in their eyes that Amanda couldn't ignore. They were looking at her with curiosity, perhaps even awe. Amanda, who had once been the subject of such adoration, now saw these young girls in a new light. They were not looking at her as a symbol of beauty or power, but as a woman who had walked through the fire and come out the other side. It was a different kind of admiration, one born of respect rather than fleeting desire. "Good afternoon, Amanda," one of the girls called out cheerfully. "You've been working so hard lately. We all see it, you know." Amanda smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. She had spent so much of her life chasing approval, seeking attention, but now she found satisfaction in these quiet moments of connection. "Thank you," Amanda replied softly, her voice full of gratitude. Hard work is important, but kindness is more so. I'm just glad to help where I can. The girls exchanged glances, their faces lighting up with understanding. You've been teaching us a lot, Amanda, another girl said, her voice full of sincerity. About being strong and humble. We didn't know you could change so much. Amanda took a moment to process their words. The compliment was unexpected, and yet in a strange way, it felt like the highest form of praise she had ever received. The village had been full of criticism and judgment for so long, but now these young girls were seeing her not as the woman who had once been full of pride, but as someone who had learned from her mistakes. Thank you for saying that, Amanda responded, her heart swelling with emotion. I hope that all of you can learn from my mistakes, and never let pride get in the way of kindness. As the girls giggled and ran off to play, Amanda stood there for a moment, reflecting on the beauty of the moment. She no longer sought adoration from the men or attention from the village leaders. She had come to understand that true admiration came not from beauty or wealth, but from the way one lived their life, how they treated others, how they carried themselves in the face of hardship. For the first time, Amanda truly felt at peace. That evening, as the sun began to set over the hills of Umuamaku, Amanda sat by the river, her legs dangling over the edge. The sound of the water flowing gently over the rocks filled her ears, and she closed her eyes, letting the cool breeze wash over her. It was hard to believe how much had changed since that fateful day when she had first come to the river, seeking the goddess's favor. She had been desperate then, blinded by her own vanity, thinking that beauty and attention would fill the emptiness she felt inside. But now the emptiness had been filled, not by the admiration of others, but by the deep love and respect she had cultivated for herself. She had learned that true beauty came not from the reflection in the mirror, but from the kindness in one's heart, the willingness to admit fault, and the courage to change. Amanda had come a long way since those days of seeking power, but there were still moments when doubt crept in, reminding her of the woman she had once been. She had worked hard to rebuild the trust she had lost, but the journey of self-acceptance was ongoing. There were still times when she looked into the mirror and wondered if she was truly worthy of forgiveness. That night, as she sat by the river, the soft glow of the moon reflecting on the water, Amanda realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't just about others forgiving her. It was about her forgiving herself. She had spent so much of her life feeling unworthy, thinking that she could never make up for the mistakes she had made. But now, sitting in the stillness of the night, she understood that self-forgiveness was the final step in her journey. The next morning, Amanda woke up early, as she often did now. The air was crisp, and the sun had yet to rise, casting a soft golden light over the village. She made her way to the square, where the village's elders were gathering for their morning meeting. Over time, Amanda had become a trusted member of their council, though her position was not one of power or influence. She had earned her place through years of hard work and unwavering commitment to the community. When she arrived, the elders were already seated in a circle, their faces full of wisdom and experience. The village leader, a tall man with graying hair, nodded in her direction as she approached. "Amanda," he said, his voice steady and warm. "We've been waiting for you. We have an important matter to discuss today." Amanda took a seat beside him, looking around at the faces of the other elders. Over the years, she had come to respect them deeply. They were the pillars of the village, the ones who kept the traditions alive and guided the community through difficult times. They had been instrumental in her own healing, offering advice, support, and patience as she worked to earn back their trust. "What's the matter?" Amanda asked, her voice soft but curious. The elder leader looked at her intently. "We've been discussing the future of the village, Amanda. There's been talk of expanding, of inviting people from neighboring villages to settle here. We think it's time for Umuamaku to grow, but we want to ensure we're ready for such a change." Amanda listened carefully, her mind already racing with possibilities. Over the past several months, the village had prospered. The crops had been bountiful, the people were healthier, and the air seemed lighter. It was clear that Umuamaku had come through a dark period, and now the future looked brighter than ever. But growth, she knew, would come with its own set of challenges. "What do you think, Amanda?" the leader asked, breaking her thoughts. Amanda looked at the circle of elders, her heart swelling with pride. These were the people who had once seen her as a symbol of everything that could go wrong: prideful, selfish, vain. Yet here they were, seeking her opinion, valuing her input. In that moment, Amanda knew she had truly changed. She had earned their respect, not through beauty or status, but through her actions. "I think the growth of Umuomaku is a good idea," Amanda said slowly, her voice full of conviction. "But we must ensure that we stay true to the values that have made us strong: unity, humility, and kindness. If we forget these things, then we risk losing what makes us who we are." The elders nodded in agreement, and the leader smiled. "We couldn't have said it better ourselves, Amanda. You've come a long way, and it's clear that you understand the true meaning of leadership. We've watched you grow, and we believe you can help guide the village forward." Amanda felt a rush of emotions at the leader's words. She had never imagined that she would become a leader in her own right. Not because of her beauty, not because of her strength, but because of the quiet, humble way she had rebuilt herself. The village had seen her transformation, and they were now looking to her to help lead them into a new chapter. As the meeting continued, Amanda felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. She wasn't just helping the village grow physically, but emotionally and spiritually. She had learned that leadership wasn't about power. It was about service. It wasn't about being admired. It was about helping others find their own strength. The days passed, and Umuomaku began to flourish. The new settlers brought fresh ideas, new energy, and a renewed sense of hope. Amanda worked alongside the elders to ensure that the village's values were upheld, that the people remained grounded in their commitment to one another. One evening, as Amanda sat by the fire, watching the flames flicker and dance, she thought back on her journey. She had come so far from the woman she once was, and though the scars of her past would always remain, they no longer defined her. Amanda had found something more important than beauty, more important than status or admiration: peace. Peace within herself, peace with her past, and peace with her place in the world. And for the first time in her life, Amanda knew that she was enough. Not because of what she had done, but because of who she had become. As the seasons turned in Umuomaku, Amanda's transformation was becoming an undeniable part of the village's story. No longer the young woman driven by vanity and a desperate need for attention, she had become a quiet force for change, a living testament to the power of growth, forgiveness, and resilience. Her once painful journey was now the inspiration for others, particularly the young people of the village who had watched her change and understood that anyone could turn their life around if they had the courage to face their flaws. Despite this transformation, the echoes of her past still reverberated through Amanda's mind. She had worked so hard to rebuild what she had once destroyed: relationships, trust, and her own sense of self. But the mistakes of her past lingered in her thoughts. There were still days when she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the mirror and felt the pang of guilt, a sharp reminder of how far she had fallen before. It was those moments, the moments of doubt, that Amanda feared the most. Would she ever truly escape the shadow of the woman she had once been? One such day arrived, quiet and crisp. Amanda was walking through the village square, greeting familiar faces as she passed, when she overheard a conversation that made her stop in her tracks. It was from two women who were sitting on a bench near the market stall. "She used to be so proud," one woman said in a hushed tone. "I can hardly believe it's the same Amanda. I remember how she used to act like she owned this village, as if none of us mattered. She was always at the center, surrounded by men and admirers. It seemed like nothing could touch her." The second woman nodded. "But she's changed. She's different now. Look at the work she does. No one would have ever imagined she'd be the one sweeping the village square, offering help to the elderly, doing all the work no one else wants to do. It's as if she's become a different person." Amanda's heart sank as she listened to their words. The first part, the part about who she had once been, still stung. She remembered all too well the arrogance she had displayed, the way she had been untouchable in her mind, oblivious to the needs of the people around her. But what came next was what hit her the hardest. The realization that, despite the changes she had made, there would always be people who couldn't fully forgive her. There would always be people who saw her only for who she had been, not for who she was trying to become. As the women continued their conversation, Amanda quietly stepped away, not wanting them to see the conflict in her eyes. She walked to the edge of the village, to the small hill where she had often gone when she needed solitude, when the weight of her past became too much. Sitting there, she stared out over the village, watching the way the sunlight streamed through the trees and touched the rooftops of the small huts. Everything was peaceful, everything was as it should be. But in her heart, Amanda felt unsettled. She was proud of how far she had come, of how much she had worked to regain the villagers' trust. But the voices of her past, the whispers and the judgments, lingered in the back of her mind. How could she ever truly move beyond the woman she had been when there were still reminders of her past mistakes scattered throughout the village? For a long time, Amanda sat in silence, letting the wind brush past her and the quiet hum of village life in the distance fill her ears. She knew she could not control what others thought of her, but she could control how she responded to it. The truth was, she had already changed. She had already shown the village that she was no longer the woman who had walked the path of arrogance. It was time for her to believe that change, time for her to stop seeking validation from others. The next day, as the sun rose and Amanda walked toward the village square, she made a decision. She would no longer carry the weight of guilt for her past. She would no longer allow the whispers to cloud her mind. She would continue doing the work she had been doing, not for anyone else's approval, but for the good of the village, for the good of herself. If others saw her as the person she used to be, that was beyond her control. What mattered now was how she saw herself. When she arrived at the village square, she was greeted by the familiar faces of the women who had been working there. There were baskets of vegetables to be sold, and Amanda joined them in preparing the goods for market. As they worked, the women began to speak, not of the past, but of the future. They spoke of the changes in the village, of the new settlers who had come and the new opportunities that lay ahead. "We've come so far, haven't we?" one of the women said, her voice tinged with hope. "Just a year ago we were struggling. We didn't know how we would survive. And now, look at us. Our children are healthy, our fields are full, and even our hearts are lighter." Amanda listened to the conversation with a sense of pride swelling inside her. These women, the ones who had been through the worst with her, were now the ones who shared in the victory of rebuilding Oumuamaki. They had done it together. And Amanda knew she had played a part in it. Quietly, humbly, but with all the sincerity in her heart. Later that evening, as the village gathered for another one of its now regular community meetings, Amanda stood before them, not as a leader, but as someone who had worked alongside them to rebuild. The village leader looked at her and smiled. "Tonight, we gather to discuss the future of Oumuamaki," he began. "As you all know, there are new opportunities ahead of us. But more importantly, we want to recognize the strength of our community. We have grown and we have healed. Amanda here has been a part of that healing, and we thank her for her tireless work." Amanda felt her heart flutter. The leader's words were kind, but they were also a reminder that despite everything, her past would always be part of her story. She could never fully escape the woman she had once been, but she had learned to live with that reality. What mattered was that she had worked to earn the village's respect, not by being perfect, but by striving every day to be a better person. After the meeting, as the villagers dispersed and returned to their homes, Amanda lingered behind, her mind a swirl of thoughts. She had come so far, but she had also realized that healing was not a destination. It was an ongoing process, one that would last a lifetime. No matter how much she had changed, she would always have to fight against the darker parts of herself, the arrogance, the vanity, the selfishness. But she was no longer afraid of that battle. She had learned to embrace her flaws, knowing that they did not define her. What defined her now was how she lived each day, how she treated the people around her, and how she continued to grow. As Amanda sat alone in her hut that night, reflecting on all she had learned, she realized that her journey was never about achieving perfection. It was about progress. It was about choosing every day to be a better version of herself, even when others didn't see it, even when the weight of her past threatened to hold her back. Amanda was no longer the girl who had made that fateful deal with the river goddess. She was no longer the woman who sought beauty and admiration above all else. She was a woman who had learned the true meaning of beauty, not in how she looked, but in how she lived. The next morning, as the sun peeked over the horizon, Amanda walked to the river once more. It had been there, beside its flowing waters, that she had first sought the answers to her pain, and it was there, by its banks, that she had learned the most important lesson of all, that beauty, power, and self-worth were never things to be obtained. They were things to be nurtured from within. She had spent too long chasing after things that could never give her peace. But now, as she stood by the river's edge, Amanda knew that the true peace she had been seeking had always been within her reach. She took a deep breath, letting the calmness of the river seep into her soul, and smiled. The future was bright, and the past, though a part of her, no longer had the power to define her. She was enough just as she was. And that was all that mattered.